Well, welcome to the 1015 podcast. The question for the day is, why am I teaching this class? And let me give you a little bit about my background and what I've done, and maybe we can figure out the why for this class. And let's see, I graduated high school and worked as a welder. And that time period, working as a welder, was productive. I made a good amount of money. I set up my own welding business. One winter day in January, I had the flu. I was sick as a dog. It was about 2 a.m. when one of my customers called me, a drilling rig outside of Casper, way out in the field. And we were in the middle of a blizzard. It was snowing. It was in the middle of the night. And they had broken something on their rig, way up in the forks. I don't know what it was. It was an experimental rig, and things broke on it frequently, and yeah, they wanted it fixed, and the whole rig was down, and I went, okay. Now let me tell you something about a drilling rig. If the whole rig is down, that means they've got a lot of people standing there doing nothing, getting paid, and they want it fixed right now. They don't care how much you charge them. They just want it fixed. So I loaded up with the flu in the middle of the night and drove out there. Finally found the rig about 4 a.m. They had lights set up. They had the replacement part. They had a whole bunch of people over there with a crane to lift up this part up to the top. And they needed a welder to go up there and cut off the existing part and weld in the new part. And so I loaded up with cutting equipment and bundled up in my coveralls and drug stuff up to the top of the rig, climbing up this ice-covered, cold rig, shivering and coughing and hacking, and got up there, and they were still messing with the crane down on the ground. And so I cut off the thing, and I'm sitting there finally, and I finally screamed down at the ground for people to move, and I just took the existing one. It was a couple 100 pounds, and levered it over to the edge and pushed it off. And it went crashing down to the ground. And then I crawled down with the cutting equipment. And I started dragging up arc welding equipment. And finally they got the crane to work, and they picked up the new piece and put it up to the top. Okay. And while I was sitting there welding, there was something that was just poking me, just bad. I mean, I'm crammed in, and it's cold and nasty, and half the time I can't even see the ground. It's snowing so hard, and there's something just keeps poking me, and I'm mad. Okay, and I'm thinking to myself, I am going to charge them 2 boatloads worth of money for this. And they aren't going to complain because it was in the middle of the night. And I finally get the new one welded on, and the wind is howling, and I flick my head and flick back the mask. And I can remember at that moment that the welding mask blew off the top of my head. It was blowing so hard. I couldn't see the ground, and it just blew off into the distance. And my hand reached out, my left hand, for something on the rig, and I can just as clear as day at this moment in time remember how I saw my fingers mist grabbing that, and they were falling away from that thing in front of me. And next thing you know, I did some sort of wild maneuver. And to this day, I'm a big fan of Red Wing boots. Yes, because my left shoelace caught on that thing that had been poking me in the ass. And there I was, hanging upside down. And suddenly, in a moment of clarity, I could see on the ground, and there was my welding equipment with it still on, flipping around on the ground, making sparks, and there was people scattering in every direction, and suddenly I had an epiphany. I was going to college. So, with no great fanfare, I packed up, sold some equipment, moved to Laramie, Wyoming, got a place to stay, and went to college. And they asked me when I signed up for college a week late what I wanted to major in. And with the amount of forethought of about 1 second, I said, pre-med. Now, I was not an ideal student to start off with. And pre-med was just about the worst. So pre-med was a bad choice for me. And I went to school like a crazy person. Because, what was I interested in school? Not being a welder. And chasing girls. That was about it. I mean, that was my interest in college. And I said pre-med because I don't know. Because that's what I thought of in that moment in time, was pre-med. So I signed up for a bunch of classes and took a bunch of things, and I'm going along. And one of those things that I'm certain by now you've probably noticed is that my spelling is horrible. This is me with an editor editing handouts for class. But one day I was reading something in Popular Mechanics or Popular Science, and there was a one-paragraph article on the fact that there was spelling checkers on computers. And I went, I'm in. I'm taking a computer class. And so that next fall, I signed up for a computer class. It was horrible. Oh my goodness. It was taught by this person that taught hardware in the computer science department. And it had 30 students, and at the beginning, he asked whether they wanted it graded on a flat system or on a curve. And about 20 of the students raised their hand for a curve, so he graded it on a bell curve. That meant 1 A, 3 Bs, a bunch of Cs. You get the picture. So, yes, the class also had the head of the Department of Chemistry in there who managed to get the A. Yes, a PhD chemist. And then there was people like me that were just struggling through, and this was done on punch cards. So that should date me to the dark ages. There were 3 channels on television, and yes, way to make a person cry is to have their deck of punch cards with their program on it in the wind, and they slip and drop their deck of punch cards and they blow away. And tears will be shed at that moment in time. I have seen it happen. So in any case, I struggled through that and still didn't know how to do a spelling checker, but I decided, I'm going to take another computer class. And this one was from one of the researchers in the computer science department, actually here at the University of Wyoming. And got to midterm. It was going along. I was actually enjoying it by this point. But there was one subject that he had discussed in class, and I thought was the most inane and useless subject. And I get to the midterm test, and the first question on the midterm is, yes, a 100-point test, a 50-point question on that subject, and I had blown that subject off because I didn't think it was useful. And so I got a 0 on it. I got 48 out of 100 on that test. And I went, I'm done. I'm dropping this class. I'm out of here. Now, this is long enough ago that you actually drop classes with a paper form, and I went and got the form and filled it out and took it to him. He looked at the form. He looked at me. He looked at the form and said, why are you dropping the class? And I said, well, I failed the midterm. And he said, oh, well, no big deal. Can't drop the class. He tore the form in half and threw it in the trash can. And he said, you're sticking it out through to the end. And I stopped for a second. I looked at him. I went, wow, I didn't know that you had to have permission to drop the class. It was going through my head. And I went, oh, okay. And I walked away and I finished the class. In fact, I got a B in that class because I had actually done really well on the rest of the test. And I did really well on the final. And I did take classes from that same guy in the future. And I did get Bs because it turned out that every single test I ever took from him, at least once a semester, I would fail like a 0 on a 50-point question. Every semester. I've had 5 classes from that guy. I got 5 Bs. I never got an A from him because I would get a 0 on something once a semester. But, I kind of went, okay, I'm here and I'm doing this thing. And I found out that I really liked writing programs and enjoyed it. And there's a certain thrill in getting a program to work and doing something with a piece of code. And good or bad, it thrills you and you get a little high from, oh, wow, that actually worked. And, you're excited and this is a good thing. And I was kind of liking this stuff. In fact, after that semester, I decided that, yes, I was going to change my major to computer science because computer science people could make pretty close to as much as doctors when you figured in how much doctors spend on insurance and things like that. The net income is very similar, and you don't have to deal with sick people, and I kind of liked it. So I switched majors, and in my crazy intention to turn this into something, I decided in college that all I would take was computer classes. So I spent a year doing that, 2 semesters, 15 hours each. I took nothing but computer classes. Now, this is back before they checked all your prerequisites with a computer. And I just signed up for the classes I wanted to take and forget the prerequisites. I figured I'd just struggle through and do whatever it took to get grades in those classes. And I did reasonably well in them. But if all you do is 15 hours of computer science for a year, and this is back before PCs, this means that you spend a lot of time in the computer lab. In fact, you basically live in the computer lab. In fact, you go home and you sleep and you eat meals in the computer lab and you're there all the time. And the computer lab was on the same floor as the office for the computer science department, so they saw me all the time. And naturally, they assumed, I must be doing something because I was there all the time. Every day, 7 days a week, I was there all the time, kind of all the time. Like, quite often from open till I went to class and came back, and right into the evening. So the second semester, I got offered a lab assistant position, and I took it because it meant more time working with computers. And I really took it seriously, and I helped a lot of people with their homework, and I learned a lot being a lab assistant. It was really good for me. And summer came, and I took the classes I could in computer science over the summer, and I was still in the lab and still working as a lab assistant. And the first day of fall semester came, and I was walking down the hallway after having worked on something in the lab. And the head of the department, who I knew at the time by then, you've taken classes from these people, he steps out in the hallway and he says to me, Philip, we had a graduate student not show up to teach a class. Do you want a full-time teaching assistantship? And I looked at him and I said, sure. And he looks back at me and he says, okay, the class starts in an hour and it's in this room. And I went, okay, I think I better prep a lecture. And I went off and prepped a lecture, and with that I became a full-time teaching assistant. Now, little did he know, he thought I was a graduate student because I was always around, and I had actually at that point taken some senior level classes, including one that he taught. He failed to check whether or not I was a graduate student. I was a junior, and he had just given a full-time teaching assistantship to a junior, which about 3 weeks later, the bureaucracy caught up with him. And yes, there was pain to be had in the land of bureaucracy because you're not supposed to give teaching assistantships to undergraduates. But it was really good for me. I earned some money and I was happy, and I got to do teaching assistantship. It was in fact the only time I did a teaching assistantship because the bureaucracy did catch up and I was still an undergraduate. But along the way I found out at that point in time that you could get like research positions and research assistantship things without being a graduate student. So the next semester, remember that guy that I failed his test? Well, I was working for him as a research assistant. And it was really good. I learned a lot from doing that. I kept taking classes. Eventually, I graduated with a master's. And I say eventually because it took me quite a while. I spent a decade going to school here. It was good, bad, fun. I took too long, yes. I wish I'd done it quicker by the end. But I had a good time, and I did a lot of other things, like teaching rock climbing for the University of Wyoming and teaching outdoor wilderness leadership classes for the university. So I had a good time, and one day I met my wife here in computer science and married her. So, I got what I was after, I guess. I chased girls and found one. And at the end, I went on to do a software consulting business. So a few businesses later, I had actually not just done one consulting business, but I had built several businesses and built a venture-funded product startup company. I turned that company into finally selling it to a much bigger company and had a successful exit from it. Bought a sailboat and spent 5 years living on a sailboat on the East Coast. I've got beautiful pictures. Maybe you'll catch the background on one of my computers and you'll see a sailboat. Yes, we lived on that for 5 years. And I was very happily retired when I came back here because my mom still lived here in Laramie, Wyoming to take care of her. She was working up until she was 88 in the education department here at the university, running a computer lab. And she was losing her sight, and we moved back to take care of her. So I spent a lot of time doing all sorts of things, but mostly contract work and product development in my own companies, and I had a very, very diversified background. I've worked on amazing amounts of stuff, all kinds of stuff, from being the lead contractor for installing Oracle Financials for ConAgra to the specification for software that is redundant and can be recovered at remote locations, which is what they use to this day for things like the Curiosity rover on Mars. So every kind of thing you can think of, I was involved in it, and a lot of hardware projects, and a lot of non-software projects too. And every once in a while I'd get mad at doing software and decide I should take a break from it and go get a job at doing something like, I'm an experienced heavy equipment operator, go do some road construction for a month and do something like run one of those things that compacts the tarmac on the pavement and drive up and down and up and down and up and down and go, software isn't that bad. Software is a pretty good field to be in. This is really dull and mindless, and that tarmac really smells bad. And I'd come back to working in the software field. So, yes, lots of other things. Although, a while back, I actually got a call. Remember, I started out as a welder, and I am actually certified for doing things like high-pressure natural gas pipeline welding and inspection. And I got a call one day from somebody saying, we're looking for somebody that can do high-pressure natural gas pipeline. I said, oh? And they offered me $60 an hour plus overtime to come out in the middle of the Red Desert and spend a couple months fixing a natural gas pipeline that had ruptured because somebody turned off the output valve before they turned off the input valve. So, those kind of things are out there. Computer science is not the only way to make money, but it's good work, it's indoors, it's clean, and also it's a lot of fun to do. It is a pleasant thing to go and build programs. So I was here, and I was kicking along doing some other things, and I noticed on a particular job site that they were offering $275,000 a year plus ownership benefits of 2% if you knew this functional programming language to come and work for this company, if you were experienced in it. And that got my attention. I went, that's an interesting thing. Who's offering over $250,000 a year to program and ownership in a company? And I went, I should learn something about this. And my goodness, I tried to learn how to do functional programming on my own, and there were things that I just didn't understand. We're actually going to cover some functional programming in this class. And I think for your first homework where you go in Excel, you've actually written your first functional program. So you'd think that this would have been obvious, but it wasn't to me at the time. And I went, here I am back in Laramie. I wonder if somebody teaches functional at the university. And I looked up, and yes, they're teaching functional programming. This was something we did not cover when I went to school. I went, I'll take the class. I'm going to learn everything I can about functional programming. And by golly, I took the class, got interested in some other things happening up here at the university. And the opportunity arose for me to come back and teach. And I went, yeah, I would actually enjoy teaching that. I've been working on these security things. Security is another subject we should really cover in a podcast and talk about some of my experiences in the realm of security. But yeah, I would be real interested in actually coming back and teaching and doing this. So that's how I got to be here. Now, the good things about this, and as I said, if there are things that you should take away from a podcast, I'd put them at the end. The good things to take away from this is, first of all, my background is in industry. It's in developing software, running teams, building businesses, and how you go about being long-term successful in the software development world. I've done everything you can do in software and hardware at some point in time. So that's my background. It's not in academia. Although these days I'm part of a research lab here at the university, and I'm probably going to be working on developing the skills with some other people, some just amazingly sharp people like Dr. Brovchek and Dr. Caldwell. We're working on learning how to publish papers. So I'm still learning and growing and getting better at this. And there are still new things for me to overcome. I'm actually taking a university class again this semester. So yeah, I'm excited about that. But In the world of being in business and software, yeah, that's my realm that I've worked through multiple times. Raising venture capital and what you do with it. The second takeaway from this is that there is a lot of money out there in software. A lot of people have a lot of demand, and there are fundamental economic reasons why software development is a really, really good business to be in, and why, jobs do pay $250,000 a year. And it's not unreasonable to make that kind of a salary in this field. The average is $102,201 across the entire United States for IT. That's a pretty good average, and you can beat that average. University of Wyoming graduates do better than that. So yeah, this is a great time in a great field, and it is fun and exciting, and new things are happening. All right, with that, that's today's podcast.